Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach. Up next, we talk about how to respond to disruptions in training and reminders to help minimize them. And after that, World of Running updates about the 24-hour world record, US 10K champs, and more. Well, if you have not yet done so, go to AtoZrunning.com/question and submit a question about your running, training, your experiences. Include the specific context so that we can address best what you are and your situation. And why do we do that? Because we really just like answering your questions even more than anything else on this podcast. And so we wanted to include as many of those as possible at our end of month Q&A episode. And we'll do just that if you go to AtoZrunning.com/question. One quick note before we get things started right now, I did want to mention, because we talked so much about things like how best to execute an effective race. And we very recently were talking about with the marathon, how to execute that race, and spent a lot of time on the point of how you need to feel when you're doing different things in a race. And that's really the defining characteristic. It was Barry McGee who essentially was saying that, well, so Barry McGee reiterating, I guess you could say, Arthur Lydiard's comments about how you run your own race and get the fastest possible time out of your body. And if that means that you were fast enough to win the race, that's great. And if it's not, it's because you didn't have that much available to you on that day or something of that nature. But the point here is that I was running a race just recently, and I made that classic blunder. And it was kind of, I was very aware in the moment that I was thinking this of what was happening here. So I thought I should share this with you because I spent enough time lecturing others on these things. Maybe not lecturing. I'm not trying to lecture you. I'm just talking about them. Anyway, so I was running a warm-up prior to the race, and I didn't know who was going to be in the race exactly. Some of the people that I thought were going to be running weren't, and so I was kind of under the impression at that point that I might not. Wasn't exactly sure how competitive it was going to be and how hard I would have to run early in the race. So like, do I try to keep up with people? Do I try to just run my own race? All that stuff. Of course, you try to run your own race, right? That's the thought that's in my head. And so I'm running the warm-up, and lo and behold, jogging past me is an old competitor from the college days. And I say that he still competes. I still compete, but he's just way better than me, has been ever since college. So I have in all realistic potentiality very little chance of beating him unless he has a very bad day in any given distance. And so he comes running by me, and the immediate thought in my head is, this changes things for how I'm going to run this race. And right as I'm thinking that, I'm like, wait, no, it doesn't. Or at least it shouldn't, right? Because we're supposed to execute our effort, not someone else's, in a race. We're not supposed to run their race. We're supposed to run our own so that we can have the best possible performance. And immediately I was starting to fall into the fallacy, and I caught myself thinking that and thought, I should share this with you all because it certainly is a easy trap to fall into. Now, that being the case, how did the race then go? You're wondering, aren't you? What happened? Well, so I'm on the start line, and he comes up to me and he's like, so what pace are you going out? And I'm like, well, I am not going out of pace because I don't do that. I'm just going to try to run. I want to feel comfortable. He's like, oh, that's great. I wanted to really kind of ease into things today. And I'm like, oh, wonderful. So we'll at least be together for like a couple miles, right? But as the race unfolded, I didn't follow my plan very well. And part of it was deliberate. I was trying to kind of test myself a little bit in terms of like, how was I feeling in response to degrees of effort. This is the only race that I have in this training cycle before a marathon in November. And so I wanted to do a little bit of just kind of like testing some things in the race. Not really running a true, like trying to execute a best case scenario race. And so as it were, middle of the race, I realized pretty quickly that I was doing more than I would want to in a true competitive race situation where I was going to try to beat the guy. So I was kind of sitting there thinking, this was risky and it's not going to pay off. And sure enough, I struggled later in the race more than I would have liked, and he just ran away from me, which probably would have happened either way. But, it feels a little better when someone's running away from you when you're feeling strong too and you're just powering ahead. Anyway, that's not the way you should do it. And so learn from my mistakes as much as from our suggestions sometimes on air. So that was more than what you bargained for in an introduction here to the episode. But what we're going to do next is dive right into our focus on disruptions.
Disruptions. Unfortunately, life is not perfect, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a great cycle. Just because there's bumps in the road, injury, sickness, life priorities that get kind of in the way of our training, even though they're good things sometimes, there will be disruptions. Without hesitation, I can pretty much say that. Don't you think, Zach?
The vast majority of questions that runners share with us when you want us to speak into your running experiences have something to do with this topic. Yeah. And so it's like, I'm feeling this pain, or my schedule isn't going according to plan, or I need to make changes for various other reasons. Of course, all of the things that influence our running against what we're planning can be a kind of disruption. And so then the question has to be for all of us, when we're in a moment of something isn't going according to plan, the question has to be, what do I do about it right now? What do I do about the next stuff when I'm back into the rhythm and routine? And how do I think about my season and my goals and my expectations and all of those things? So all of that's happening all at once. And so this is why these kinds of things are so difficult for runners specifically, is because when you experience a disruption, it's not just like an inconvenience in a moment, even if it is a small thing, but it has these kind of like cascading effects that we tend to feel. And so there's like an added pressure of, I've got to get through it as quickly as possible, or everything's falling apart and woe is me, or, all of that kind of stuff.
I can tell you one thing at this very moment, because I'm experiencing it a little bit right now, is when you are in a time of stress and you're not able to accomplish all the things that you want to accomplish, a lot of us go into like emergency mode, and we have a hard time seeing the big picture, and we live in this emergency mode. I think that's the best way to put it. And I think it's really important to set out and think about what we're going to do when these disruptions happen and how we can almost plan for them so it's a little bit more seamless. The decisions are easier when we come to these inevitable bumps in the road.
Well, and the opposite reality that is also, and probably just as often true depending on the person, is you're either going to emergency mode or you're going to total apathy. And so then it's like, I don't really care. I'm just not going to, my goals are already kind of falling apart, or my expectations for the season haven't come to fruition. And so, I'm just going to not care about it. And not caring about it today tends to produce not caring about it tomorrow and next week. And then you find yourself months later thinking, man, I really wish that I would have been like training all that time, because now I've got something I want to do again, or I just want to get back into it and it's hard, all those things.
So this is the thick of it. This is the real life moment you've been waiting for on the A to Z Running podcast, where you find out how you can do this thing called life and achieve your goals in running.
Wait, this is the one? I thought we've been talking about that for years.
Yes, but I'm specifically today talking about this real life stuff that comes up, and really a lot of us perceive these things as failures when they're totally not. I know some people feel shame when they can't get their run in, or something pops up and they miss a few days of training, or things aren't what they should be in their minds. The shoulds, coulds, should have beens. And I think we need to move ourselves away from that, and we need to be more adaptable, and that's how we're going to thrive. And the purpose of the A to Z Running podcast is to help runners thrive, and I think that this conversation is imperative to do that.
The timing is important too, because if you've been following our recent episodes, we were talking about, and in particular the marathon, how to be successful in the race and what to do in preparation. And if you didn't listen to those two episodes, while it is focused predominantly on the marathon, it's quite practical for other race distances too. But the key here is, now when you have a kind of thought process like what we were walking through there, everything's assuming the ideal, which is never, as Andy mentioned when we started the topic, it's never going to be the case. The ideal is impossible in a world where ideals don't come together perfectly. Not to say that it doesn't happen from time to time, but it certainly is unlikely. So then we come to these considerations. And the first and most important reminder before we say anything else is the mindset that we tend to get wrong as runners, which is when there's something that disrupts things, we look for how can I make up for it, or how can I catch up or get back to, or all of those things. So here's my big goal, and some disruption happened. How do I make sure that that goal is still possible? And that mindset in general tends to be counterproductive because it makes us do or choose to do things that are not the most effective things to do. In other words, how did you say
Yeah,
it
a
here?
big mistake runners make is that they try to make up mileage. So even in a week, so we can talk about on the micro level, a runner will miss a day of running and then do a 2-a-day on a different day, or they'll extend a different run in order to make up this mileage. Well, if your goal is to build your systems, you are impacting on the day that you're trying to make it up, you're impacting further down the line, and you can actually inhibit yourself from being able to continue your training in the proper way. So taking that as a loss and then resting up and getting after it when you can. If you miss a day, don't try to make it up. That's a micro level. And then I guess on the bigger level, like Zach was saying, just having that feeling of angst, like you need to catch up, and then running too fast too soon, which you guys have heard us warn against time and time again.
Or too long.
Or
too
soon. Yeah. Skipping steps in training, because we need to be able to do this thing healthily and build our systems, not achieve some arbitrary pace during training to make us feel like we're ready.
And it should be noted that while it is true in a general sentiment that you don't really make up for lost training by adding more training to an already full training schedule, there are certainly some kinds of options for flexibility that tend to add some convenience. A good example of that is simply if you have a day off a week already in the schedule and it's supposed to be at the end of the week, and you suddenly, because of work or life or something, have to take a day off in the middle of the week that you didn't expect, chances are you could shuffle around your schedule in an effective way to take the day off earlier and then still have a run later on when you would have been off later. So like there are ways of making adjustments, and we'll get to a little more specifics with that here in a moment. But the key consideration is when there is something that's disrupting things, what do I do about it in the moment? How do I approach then the next steps after it? And depending on the degree of disruption, that's going to change, of course. And then as well, what does it do to change our thinking in our goals and expectations?
There are a lot of reasons that you might have a disruption. And so we realize that it will be hard to hit all the variety of reasons and speak to them directly.
And maybe this is a good moment to just say the best way to have that situation you're thinking of addressed directly is to ask it in a question. And we'll answer
we do
it at
have
the
a
end of the month
Q&A.
episode.
Yeah.
AtoZrunning.com/question to submit your situation.
So during the disruption, when you can't run, if you're not able to run due to injury or sickness, one thing that can help you moving in that is finding a way to help your body feel and move better. Now, there's going to be a variety of sicknesses, a variety of intensities of sicknesses. And so, like I said, we can't speak to them all. But if you're able to maybe even still do a little bit of light cycling, some mobility, get your body on this path towards healing and setting yourself up for training when you can again.
Yeah, the principle is, regardless of the degree of that scenario, injury or sickness, find the thing you can safely and healthily do that is as close to supporting running as possible, and do that. And so that's where, you tend to need some outside input. If it's an injury, talk to medical people who can advise. If it's an illness, it's going to depend, because certain types of illnesses need total rest, and certain other types of illnesses don't need total rest, but certainly, you can't train the same way. And so you have to take that into account depending on what is going on there. But find the thing that is as close to running as possible, or supports running movement as possible, that you can safely and healthily do, and do that.
This is going to sound cheesy, but I want you to keep in mind when you're sick or have injury, honor your body. Think about what you're going to do to serve your body's needs best, and don't railroad your health in order to do your training. And I think that a lot of us can take advantage of our abilities and what we've done and really seek to drive after a goal that puts our health in jeopardy. And I think we need to remember that the only thing that's going to really get us there is a healthy body, mind, and spirit. So if our body is not on board for it, we're not going to be able to get there. So honor your body and just think what your body needs in order to heal and recover best.
Yeah, and that's probably the first question you actually need to answer before you're looking for what can I do that helps complement running. First question is, what does my body need to heal or recover as quickly as possible? And then, like, be deliberate about it, because if it's something like, I've got some kind of tendon damage or a strain somewhere in a tendon, well, there are certain things that you can ingest, like nutrients that help the body heal those types of things better. And so it's like, I should find the kinds of foods and nutrient supplements and anything else that's valuable and helpful to help my body repair and recover.
Right.
And the same proves true with illness. What are the things that you can do to help your body get through illness faster? Like, sleep more.
Sleep. And that's probably one of the things that I was thinking of when I mentioned railroading your body is you might not want to get up early in the morning if your body's super fatigued and your body is just feeling so worn down. Waking up early in the morning to get a run in when you're sick is counterproductive to your body's healing. You might actually prolong the period of time your body is needing to recover. If you just take care of it right away, you might be taken care of sooner. But of course, I'm not your medical professional, but I have found that if your body is very, very fatigued, handling that sooner than later is preferable.
Yeah. So then what about, though, for disruptions that are not health disruptions, like you can train, but something is making it unlikely or restricted, pressures on time, if it's a work thing, family things, travel, social stuff, other commitments that have come up. Okay, so
what other commitments, Zach, in life?
I have no idea, because it doesn't make any sense to me why anything would be more important than running, of course. So
he's teasing.
What you have to do with these kinds of things is you have to, and this is the important question, is what time and space is available to me and what can I do with it? Because most of the time, I'm not going to say anything more than that. Most of the time, for most of us, what feels like a thing that's stopping us from having the time to run, chances are is not stopping us as much as we think it is. Whether it's because we're stressed out or it's because that we just don't want to think about it. We don't want to deal with it. But when I look at the situation, and when we talk with runners, a lot of the time this comes up where it's like, I can't run because I've got this, and this. And it's like, okay, let's go down to like the minutes in the day. How much time do you have at this time or at this time? And what we tend to find out is it's like, well, if I don't do these little things that I was going to do that are kind of fun, like watch this show or something, it turns out I have an hour and a half that I could get in some amount of a run. Or if I just simply get up a couple minutes earlier than I really wanted to, well, then it turns out I still have time to run. Of course, you still need to make sure you're getting enough sleep regularly, because we don't want to tell you to get 4 hours of sleep every night so you can train. But the point is, most of us can still find the time. And so that's the first thing that we have to just be honest about. Okay, my schedule's getting crazy. Things are getting tight and busy. Where are the minutes and where's the wasted time? And how do I remedy these things?
And Zach had hit a point that I want to talk about further, and that was what we perceive it as, like, is making us feel more stressed out. And we talk on this show about the difference between being an obligatory runner and a thriving runner. A lot of us can get into our routines, and of course, if we're being disciplined and diligent, that can become obligatory, and how we view running at that time might cause us stress. So if we're able to reframe things a bit and see it in a better light, maybe we can remember why we love it and have it be a stress relieving part of our day. Maybe we call a friend because that's going to invigorate us. Whatever we need to do in order to see it less as an obligation and more of an opportunity will be helpful in our seasons of life that feel out of control.
Yeah, and of course, as these things go, choosing to find a way to make the time to run is sometimes the thing that creates more stress and pressure, and sometimes finding time and making it happen is a thing that creates less stress and pressure,
right.
Because maybe some of the stress is from like I'm stressed out because I'm not going to get to run. And if I can run a little bit, that still is going to be helpful that day. So you have to weigh the situation as it currently is. But one of the other side effects of these situations is that we start to apply pressures that tend to build momentum. And they're negative pressures. And it comes from that thinking of, I'm missing a day of training and my season's not going as well as I'd hoped. And so this little hiccup here, maybe it's going to have a bad effect, or maybe it's like a significant thing, like I'm missing a long run this week and I just don't have time to find any other day to do it. And so now I feel badly because I'm trying to run a marathon and I need my long runs, all that kind of stuff. And the first and immediate answer we always give to these situations is stop doing that. Stop thinking about all the ramifications of missing a day of training, because if you can't train that day, it doesn't matter what the ramifications are. You can't change anything about that. So you just take them, you take the consequences as they are, because life is going to give you situations that you cannot control. And that may be one of them. Of course, remember my first point. First, look for, is there a way for me to actually, better address this in my schedule and my structure for the day? Or if there's not, which many times there aren't, stop stressing about the impact on the rest of the season, because that doesn't help you at all.
No, I would say the stress probably doesn't help.
Yeah. And that's easy, right? When someone tells you just to stop, then you can just stop.
Zach is very clear cut. Like he sees things, he's very analytical, and I'm on the other side of things
too. And I sometimes taste them.
I feel things and I get caught up in how I feel. And so I think that it's really good too. And this is just, side plug, not just for our coaching, but for any of you that are looking. I mean, some of you have other coaches, some of you are coaches, but having someone in your life that has a more objective view of your training is super helpful, especially for those of us who don't see it so clearly. Thank you, Zach.
Perhaps, or maybe I just made the stress and pressures worse. But either way, that's kind of the big piece here is how these kinds of disruptions are influencing our thinking at large as well. And we mentioned earlier that we want to kind of get into this a bit here, because what tends to happen then is I start to think things like, I was sick for a week and so I trained just a little bit, or I was hurt for a few days, or I've got this strain in my leg, but I'm not really taking the time that I need to heal and recover, because I feel like if I do, I'm going to miss a couple days of training and that's going to affect my big goal that I've got this season, right? So then we don't even take care of ourselves and we end up hurt even worse or something. So all of this is coming from that situation where in the moment, I'm concerned that the disruption is having catastrophic effects on my big goals and dreams, right? And of course, that's a very natural thing to experience in that kind of a moment, because as runners, we tend to be dream-oriented or goal-oriented. And so the first thing we have to always do with this kind of thinking is we have to just put it on hold for a little bit until the disruption is past. Because when we're in the midst of an already stressful or difficult, for whatever reason, health, sanity, or otherwise, when we're in the midst of that difficult moment, starting to apply those external pressures of like my goals are falling apart makes it worse. And so it makes us do things and choose to do things, as I said earlier, that are not productive. Like we train when we should be resting, or we
train too hard
when we should be keeping it easy for a little bit. Or we, as Andy said, we try to make it up later and add more stuff onto an already well-loaded training schedule. So all of that kind of stuff is basically like this mentality of I got to make it happen because my goals are really important to me. And while that is true, that making it happen thing doesn't actually make us more likely to achieve our goals. As a matter of fact, most of the time, it makes us less likely to achieve our goals. So at its core, that is hurting us, even though we're doing it because we feel like we need it to help us. So we have to always be objective about something like that. And then the other side of it too is there's this kind of just this fatalism where it's like, the disruption and sometimes it results in apathy. The disruption makes it so I can't achieve anything and, throw up my hands and I'm done.
I'm going to take a guess. I'm just going to guess that many runners, not all, because I'm not one of them, but many runners are perfectionists. And it's very difficult to move from a sense of disappointment because a day didn't turn out. It's very hard to move into a positive direction if things aren't going perfectly. So would you say, Zach, that could be a struggle for a lot of runners, is like, if I'm not doing this perfectly, then I'm not going to achieve my goal?
Yes. And what it tends to amount to is simply just a short-sighted look at the sport of running, because there's no great running experience was short-term in the making. No great running lifetime or career is made by a single season that was wonderful, like all these kinds of things. And so what we have to do in all of these types of frustrating moments is we just simply have to keep the big view in mind, which is just, get back into, when you can, get back into the things that you can do in a productive way. So you're thriving, you're not forcing yourself into training that's unhealthy and all of that. So you get back into that when you can, you recreate the routines and the consistency when you're able. And just remember that over time, yes, it's true, you may in fact have a season that doesn't go as well as you had hoped, or you were really fit and things were going super well, and then some kind of injury disrupted you before you even had a chance to like prove the fitness with a good race. Andy made that comment a couple of years ago before her surgeries amounted to major disruptions. And that is, that's a reality we have to deal with. It's a disappointment, and we're not going to deny the fact that would be disappointing. But what that is it's just simply a part of the big process. And the runners who tend to have the most valuable and meaningful experiences over time tend to be the ones who stop letting those disruptions cause that substantial thinking about their running careers and goals. And so, yes, it's true, it's going to be disappointing in that moment, but you just simply take what the moment gives you and then look for, what can I do next?
Mm-hmm. I think it was Kendra Chambers who said, she's a professional middle distance runner, who said, I love the process more than the prize. And that stuck with me because it's super simple, and I hope it can stick with you too. If we can really love the process, then the disappointment doesn't seem as great when we aren't able to show in a race our fitness. And so what does it take to really love the process? I'm sure that you'll find a way.
Well, let me just make one other comment too to that end, which is it's so sad. And I mean that in like a literal sense. It just makes me feel sad when I talk with a runner who has been chasing some goal for years and years and years and just is never achieving it. And sad in the sense of, because not always, but sad when they're expressing how disappointing that has been all these years chasing this goal. And I keep thinking to myself, but are there not other exceptional things about that experience of all those years? And yet in my mind, that success is only if I achieve that goal. Now the rest of it is disappointment. And that's a heavy burden for anyone to bear, but it's especially heavy when we're putting it on our own shoulders unnecessarily. So there's a kind of thinking here, and that's not really the intent of our time right now, but there's a kind of thinking around like, how do I just imagine myself in the sport, which is always a fun exercise. But for the purposes of our time here, at some point or another, the disruption will end as well. And we have to be thinking about, what do we do then, and how do we adjust accordingly as we're coming out of it too, whether it's a day or a week or a 2 years season of surgeries.
Yeah, I would say if you're hopping back in after a few days off and you have a workout on the schedule, don't do the workout.
Yeah, keep it light and easy for a couple days.
Especially if you're like coming off of some sickness, or maybe if your Achilles had flared up or your plantar fasciitis has flared up. Take it easy. We don't need to run a workout the first day that we're back after a few days off.
There is a physiological concept here, and I don't really know what it is. But doing something in an extreme, even if it's not a severe extreme, but doing something in an extreme after a disruption in rhythm and momentum is itself very dangerous for us. It causes all sorts of problems potentially. And so think about it, even something as simple as this. If you're standing put and you just take off at a dead sprint, why is it that sprinters pull hamstrings more than anybody else?
Because their muscles aren't
It's not because they're trying to run as hard as possible. Because look at those distance runners when they're finishing races. They run 100 meters as hard as they possibly can, just like all those sprinters. But they never pull hamstrings. Yes, never. Yeah, slower. It's not because they're running as hard as possible. It's because they're going from zero to as hard as possible instantly. And so that by itself, now that's of course just one example, but the principle applies here where we don't want to go from disrupted rhythm to push myself hard or super long ever. That's just never a good idea. If the disruption is just a day, like I had to take a day off unintentionally, okay, we understand that. But anything more than that, basically, ease into it.
Ease into it.
Don't go super long. Don't go super fast for a couple days to, get back your rhythm.
I want to emphasize, again, not skipping steps in your training after a disruption. So if your body is not ready to move on to the next phase of training or to increase your long run or whatever the change in your schedule may be, repeat the week again. If your body is not ready to move on from it, which it likely won't be if you didn't get the training in for that week. So just push everything another week or more, depending on how long you took off.
Yeah, and most of the time, keep in mind our conversation last week. If you didn't hear it, go back and listen to it, where we're talking about how to prepare well for the race at the end of the season. One of those considerations is following the schedule is not what guarantees that I'm doing the best thing in training,
right?
But rather doing the thing that my body needs. Now, of course, if you're actively working with a coach, hopefully they're doing that for you, is they're making adjustments so that the training is still fulfilling what your body actually needs. And plug for coaches out there who are all going to appreciate what I'm about to say. They only know that if you tell them how things are going.
Yes.
So
please
if
tell
you
us.
want your coach to adjust things for you as they need to be adjusted, they need to know how things are going. Okay, so the principle here, though, is exactly that, where you do the thing that your body needs, not the thing that the paper says. And so, as Andy said, if you're missing some parts and pieces because of a major disruption, just doing the next thing on the schedule is almost guaranteed to be the wrong thing for your body in almost every situation. There are certainly going to be some
like phases
exceptions.
where it's like 4 weeks or, so then likely you would be getting back into a similar kind of training you were doing before. So, but yeah, we're getting into the weeds right here.
Yeah. The weeds are sometimes necessary. Sometimes they're flowery.
Join us in the weeds. So some disruption is unavoidable. But are there ways to minimize disruptions? And the answer is yes. You probably guessed it. Last week discussed a key part of training, and something that's overlooked so often is musculoskeletal strength. And so in the beginning of a season, if we're going to try to avoid injury or ramping up too quickly, let's focus on musculoskeletal strength, and that can help us mitigate some disruptions.
Indeed it can. And if you're in the midst of things and tending toward, and this is one of those pieces that's always very difficult to try to you can't really know until retrospect, but most of the time, that you're headed in a bad direction when your body's not responding well to what you're trying to do in training. And so this is one of those pieces where it's like you need to set the right building blocks first. And one of the things that tends to be really valuable is we know the musculoskeletal side of things is what's going to tend to define what you can do in training and everything else. Can your body actually hold up under the training that you're doing? And so one of the valuable pieces here is that it's almost always a good idea to at least jog in the sense of if I'm not feeling great, if I'm having some fatigue, if I'm feeling some soreness, all that kind of stuff, some light jogging types of efforts takes us back to the very beginning, the fundamental building block to starting to build musculoskeletal strength and resilience. And so one of those considerations that we always need to keep in mind is that if I'm trying to run too hard, chances are I don't necessarily need to take a week off to get better. I need to get some musculoskeletal resilience built up a little bit first. So go back to some jogging or something.
Slow running is not junk miles. Slow miles are not junk miles. And I feel like I don't know how often I see it, but it's way too often. It makes me angry because people think that it's worthless to jog slow, and it's not. It is imperative to have some slow running in your schedule. And if you only are feeling up for a slow jog, it's valuable. So don't let anyone think that going out and running some slow, easy miles is not worthy of your time. It absolutely is.
Yeah, it's even to the point where some researchers took that to the extreme, and they thought, for runners, is walking valuable?
Yes.
And in fact, they found that people who did this regimen of walking prior to or in the midst of a training thing compared to people who didn't, we're still seeing some amount of benefit more simply by just going for long walks. And so, yes, on principle, you don't have unlimited time in the day. So you can't I can't remember who was saying this. Maybe it was Barry McGee. It might have been Arthur Lydiard. But one of them was saying that at one point, they had someone who was like trying to like jog 6 hours a day. And they're like, yeah, if you have all the time in the world, feel free to do that. If you can do it healthily, because it's going to help you at least some. But most of us don't have that time. Also, that probably will hurt you. We're talking about like back in the 60s where people were doing things and living in different ways. But the point is it is true that even the most minimal effort type of stuff is having an impact. And what it is there's a time in your training where that's the right kind of training adaptation that you need. And certainly there's a time in your training where you don't need that as much. So yes, it's true. You're not going to be jogging all day, every day for an entire training cycle, but you should be in certain points.
Yeah. I tell people, if you run, you're a runner, because people don't want to be referred to as a jogger, but I don't know when along the way that became a negative thing. I will proudly tell you all that I jog. So I am a jogger, but I'm also a runner. I run.
You're not a very good example of this.
I just want to like pull away that negativity when it comes to jogging, because it is really an important thing, and it is running. It's just when you define easy running versus jogging, when you're trying to find the nuance within your training, I jog quite a bit. So does Zach. Zach jogs. So also, proudly a jogger here.
Because you're listening to us, you are a far more informed runner than the vast majority of them in the world. So if someone wants to call you a jogger because you're running easy, you can just say, yeah, but I know more about running than you. So eat it.
Zach, eat it. Zach loves when I try to give my little inspo. Yeah, my inspirational things that I like to say.
Why is that called inspo?
I don't know where that came from.
Don't do that.
Okay, I will stop doing that. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And when you come back to training, just because you can run faster doesn't mean you should run faster. Just because you can grit and bear a workout the first day back doesn't mean you should do that. We believe you're capable, and you yourself need to believe you're capable, and you don't need to prove it to yourself that you are. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. That has stuck with me in my life, and not only has it benefited me in my running, but also in life in general. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind.
So maybe it's a good idea to summarize these most essential points here for a moment, because as we're thinking about what is most practical when you're in the midst of a disruption, the practical takeaway here is a little different than if you're not, so that you can make sure you try to minimize them. But the key thing is always that we have to be responsive to what our body needs as we're training. And that's true whether we're disrupted or otherwise. And so when we're experiencing disruptions, we have to make the choices that are accordingly are most necessary for our body. And it doesn't matter if the goals might be affected by that. We can't force ourselves, as Andy keeps saying, back into this optimal experience. And so if we're not experiencing disruptions, but of course we're trying to make sure we don't, one of the things that tends to help the most is making sure that we're not doing things that our body can't handle. And so making choices in training that are based off of where am I at right now and what do I need to get to the next step. It doesn't matter what the next step is, whether or not it is the step that I think is going to take me to my goal. It's the only step available to me because it's the next one.
So adjusting training, like Zach is saying, is one of the key ways that we can help ourselves avoid disruption. Of course, nutrition, hydration, and sleep, but you knew we were going to say that. You all know these things, but sometimes a reminder is good. And then this one's kind of different. It's the communication.
Social side of it.
The social side of it. If a disruption is because we need to focus on work or family, or our life doesn't seem to be quite in balance, we need to think about how in the beginning of our cycle we can communicate and prioritize our life and our time in a way that works. It's just a game of organization, and also honoring others and our other obligations within our life as well. So having clear communication, having a design. Zach loves this, the description I gave of building a house. We have plans when we build a house. We don't just start hammering things together, hoping that it all comes together. We need to be able to see the big picture and then make a plan in order for it to help us within our lives. So communication is key. You've heard it and you'll hear it again.
And one of the reasons why Andy likes to emphasize that so much is because of how badly I do it. And so
you're much better. You're much better than beginning years. No, it's getting better.
Like today, for example, which, who knows when you're hearing this, whether it's related to or close to the day when I'm saying today, but today is case in point, another example where, just not, I'm not being very responsive when the question of like, hey, I'm trying to figure out when I'm going to run and when are we going to do this thing. And I just kind of ignore it. And then it gets to the point where it's like, now I'm not quite sure we have enough time for everybody to do the things they need to do when they need to do it. What are you doing, Zach? And of course the answer is not paying enough attention to what's needed. So yeah, but this is it. This is exactly it. Is most disruptions are preventable, but we don't know that.
Not all.
No, most. Not all. Most. And maybe it's minimizable. As Andy said, we're minimizing, but most are preventable simply because if we would have known the things that caused the disruption ahead of time, we could have made moves that would have stopped that.
But life's not
perfect.
Of
course, you can't know the future. So you're obviously not going to know
the future. Yeah.
But all of these things amount to, if we can at least do well with the things we can control best, then we can get closer to fewer disruptions. And so if the disruptions are things like schedule and work and family and such, then the most important thing that I need to be thinking about is who are the people I need to be communicating with more regularly so I know what's going on and when it's happening, and what are the times of day that I need to be training or planning to train. Do I sit down each week and look at the week's schedule and talk to the right people and say, here's when I'm going to be training, so that it's very clear when I'm going to most likely have the time for it. Of course, it won't always work out, but it'll be better than if I just wake up every day and then think, I was going to run this morning, but I'm doing this instead. And then the afternoon I'll run. And then afternoon comes around and sure enough, I didn't realize that we have something going on and I can't run. And there goes the day.
There goes the day.
So there are things we can do, the communication side of things, that kind of thing. Stay on top of our nutrition and our rest and our hydration. The worst thing that every one of us says almost every day is we get to the afternoon when we're going to run, if you're an afternoon runner, and we think, man, I should have drank more water today. I'm feeling parched. It's too late. I already did the damage. Well, that's avoidable. That is easily avoidable.
Or, bring hydration on the run, even if it's shorter than an hour.
Yep. Or how about
you haven't been hydrating.
How about the one where it's, 11 o'clock rolls around p.m. and I'm thinking, I was going to run at 5 tomorrow morning with those guys, but I was watching this show and a couple episodes in realized that's later than I thought. That was avoidable and didn't need to happen.
Even Zach has those times too. So
I do
we
watch
can all
shows
feel better
once
about
or twice
ourselves
a year. So
once or twice a year. That's
is
pretty accurate, actually.
There is action. There are actions that we should always be trying to take. And this has less to do with like just being, good in terms of the running side of thing and more to do with like, we are going to have a better life in general. So if you're not a runner and you're hearing this, you're nodding along and saying, yeah, that's true. It doesn't really matter if I run or not. All of those things apply. And indeed they do.
Mm-hmm. So adapt and thrive. Adapt and thrive. Adapt and thrive.
Why do you keep saying those words over and over?
Because I want them to stick. Because I feel like that kind of brings us to adapt and thrive. It brings us to the conclusion of our discussion about disruptions, because they will happen. And what do we do with it? Where do we go with it? And how do we try to mitigate disruptions in our lives? And that will help us live a thriving life and enjoy running more and hopefully become better runners too.
That's great. So now that we've solved all of your problems, we can move on to the world of running. Let's get it started with some A to Z runner updates, as we like to do. This time, a lot of racing over the past weekend. Laura ran a 14K, which is a peculiar distance by the very nature of uncommonality, and it's very interesting. So nice work, Laura, running the 14K race. And in a 10-mile run, we had a whole slew of people. Zach ran a PR. Jacob ran a PR. Nikki ran a PR. Jax ran well. Andrew pacing. Hannah with the craziest finish, the fastest finish of just about anybody, I think. And Adi Dano, Christy, all racing well. Dano including an age group victory there. And then a 5K, Nick ran a PR. Martha, Kelly, and Stephanie all running as well. And Stephanie also helped pace a family member. So great work all around to the runners in those races, and especially appreciate the chance to support many of you. Now, first up on our list for World of Running today is another world record 24-hour performance by none other than Alexander Sorokin, who held the previous record when he set it last year. So Sorokin from Lithuania has run so much farther than anybody else in a 24-hour. It's really quite incredible. For perspective here, he's run 16 kilometers better than the next best person in the event. And that record stood prior to Sorokin breaking it since 1997 to 2021. And so quite an accomplishment breaking the record and now re-breaking his own record to run. You're curious how far? He ran in 24 hours. He ran 198 miles or 319 kilometers. And that amounts to about a 7:15 per mile pace, which is, I don't know exactly what to say at the moment for running 200 miles straight in 7:15 pace. This, by the way, 10K more than last year when he broke the record, which is really something because, 6 miles is over the course of 24 hours is not a small distance to gain. And yet he did. It should be noted, as we've shared in the past, that one of the things that's profound about Sorokin is that at 41 years of age, he's running these incredible ultra performances, and more specifically, only started running in 2013. For perspective here, he's only been doing this for like 9 years, which is incredible. And I appreciate the reason, the rationale. He wanted to start running as a part of a lifestyle change because he was drinking and smoking too much, he said. So impressive work there from the Lithuanian, and always exciting to see what else he can do in the ultra scene. Next up is the 10K championships for USATF on the roads. This one is a particularly notable one because the female winner was Stephanie Bruce, and this has been her final year running professionally. She announced earlier that she will be retiring at the end of this year after running the New York Marathon. And so Stephanie Bruce, already quite an accomplished runner in myriad disciplines, cross country, track, and roads, has shown yet again that while she's retiring at the end of this year, it's not because she can't do it. And so she won the 10K championships after, in this event in particular, having run it 4 other times and finishing second 3 of those 4. She finally pulled off the victory in this event that was hosting the U.S. championships. So that was really impressive. She ran a course record time in the process over Erica Kemp's record, which was set last year in 2021. And in so doing, beating a very strong field. Second and third were Nell Rojas and Annie Frisbee as well. So very impressive by Stephanie Bruce. On the men's side, Bias Mbasa won the race, also in a course record time, which is no small thing given that the previous owner of that record is none other than Ryan Hall from 2006. So plenty of people have run on this course since then, and it's taken a fair bit of time before it's been broken. So great run by Bias Mbasa, winning the men's race. The primary reason why he dominated was what he did in the 4th mile, and I wanted to say this specifically with you because it's just an incredible thing. So he ran like 28:13. I don't have the number written here, but it's something like 28:13 for the 10K, which is very fast. Do the math, and it's like 14:0 something per 5K. And so that's quick. But what was especially notable is that in his 4th mile, he dropped like another 10-second faster mile than the others, running 4:23 for his 4th mile. So just right in the middle of the race, put on the afterburners and dropped everybody, which is kind of a natural thing. You would expect that most people would not want to hold on when someone's doing something like that, and instead just kind of wait and then try to catch them a little bit later. Well, nobody caught him, as it were. And so it was a great move, a bold move, and won him the race over Leonard Career and Sam Chalanga. And so you've heard us certainly talking about those two quite a bit. Between the three of them, those guys are dominating the roads in many different distances, which is an exciting thing to see. There's kind of a bit of like ongoing competitiveness between them and others, which is fun. And then the third thing here for our main share from the world of running is a study, in fact. And so this was a recent article published by Canadian Running. And in particular, the study is a 2019 study that they were sharing just earlier, a week or so ago, depending on when you're listening to this. And the study published in the Journal of Physiology was examining the relationship between recovery and ice baths, or specifically just like cold treatment, which is, ice baths. And so that's a fascinating study, because when you start to look at the details here, the first thing that stands out is that apparently, while many claim that ice baths are great for recovery and articulate quite coherently how that physiologically can be true, at the same time, come to find out, there's not been a lot of studies around certain kinds of factors related to recovery. Certainly, there's a circulatory component, and that's where the claim comes from. The recovery claim is that ice baths help with circulating blood flow, which can make sense because there's a constriction, and so the current blood in your tissues and fibers is kind of constricted, which is like squeezed out, and then that's why you like get all pale when you're coming out of the ice bath, and like you push on your skin and it like takes a while for the blood to come back. So there's a constriction, and so then new blood flushes back through once you warm back up. And so that seems to have kind of taken the focal point. What they did in this study is that instead they looked at the protein synthesis that happens in your muscles. And so what your muscles are doing is they're going to take an amino acid, proteins, and they're going to use it and convert it essentially into a fiber protein, which is like the muscle tissues themselves, the fibers. Myofibrillar or something like that is the word for it. But so what they do then is, in this study, is they subject these athletes to a strenuous thing, and they did this daily for like 2 weeks or something. They subject them to a strenuous activity and some kind of resistance thing, and then proceed to have them take in protein, like eat protein, consume protein, while then also doing an ice bath each day after the activity. And so, according to like what we would normally think of, this is a good recovery routine, essentially. Then what they found was kind of a shocker and a little bit concerning for those of us who have used ice baths regularly for many periods of our lives. So in short, the study found that for the 12 subjects that they studied, consistently for all of them, there was an up to 26% reduction in protein absorption for a 5-hour period post ice bath, or up to 5-hour period. It wasn't exactly the same for everyone, but it was very close. So the point is, for all subjects, it was a consistent reduction in protein absorption in the muscles. And as a consequence, the muscles can't rebuild as effectively because they're not absorbing that protein, which begins the rebuilding process. And we all know that recovery is the most important in immediate proximity to the activity that strains us, that stresses our system. And so this is distressing for all of us who like ice baths. Here's the two caveats. The first is, this is a tiny study. They studied 12 subjects. That is not a sample size representative of any major population of any kind. And so, as you do with these kinds of things, the first thing you have to do is find more examples of this being conducted successfully, proving the same results. And so more people need to study it for sure, or they need to study it with more people, whoever did. And so in that case, there's certainly a concern expressed there. However, when you have a study like this and the results are consistent across all of those subjects, even if there's only a few subjects, so look at the numbers here. If you've got 12 subjects and 2 or 3, let's say 3 of them have slightly different results than others, well, that's 25% of your sample size. That's substantial. So if you have a 25% margin of error, that's not okay. They would need to really vet that study more. But in this case, it wasn't like that. And so now what we would assume is that if you were to replicate the study, you'd probably see similar results. So I'm curious about those replications, and we'll try to find more at the time of the study, apparently it was, as far as they knew, the only study that looked at that component of recovery, the protein synthesis dynamic that's happening. So there you go. Your ice baths may not, in fact, be helping you recover. And for quite some time, there's been some skepticism that's not necessarily been founded on much proof. However, that skepticism is rational because, it seems like ice baths, there's a lot of people out there who are doing that like constantly, and there's a lot of people out there who never do it. And the people who never do it don't seem to need it. And the people who do it a lot, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not like getting hurt or burnt out or something. So, of course, the ice bath is not a magical cure-all, but in this case, it might in fact be a detriment more than a value, or at least not as valuable as we thought. Okay, now I did want to take just a couple of minutes here because these are not part of my main few that I wanted to share with you from the world of running, but just some interesting quick tidbits. The first is, if you watched the World Championships this year, this is a sprinter, so we didn't really cover these kinds of things, but Noah Lyles, the 200-meter champion, and champion applies at more grandeur than just the World Championships because he's doing things that only Usain Bolt has bettered. And bettering Usain Bolt in some ways. Noah Lyles, after the race, this is just to say, he ripped his uniform like a beast. That he was roaring and stuff, and it was awesome, right? After he won the race. Well, as it happens, in an interview, he confessed that he practiced that move beforehand, practiced ripping jerseys to know, how it would work or if it would work, which stands to reason, given in the Olympics last year when Karsten Warholm of Norway in the 400 hurdles tried to rip his uniform like a beast, and it didn't really rip. It did, but it got stuck. So it was more like just a hole instead of a ripped. Anyway, so that was probably a good move for Noah Lyles to practice that, and I think it's funny, but also I don't begrudge him, or not begrudge, but I don't hold it against him. Okay, quick other thing. In track and field news, they have published the predictions of NCAA cross country. And I find this always to be very fascinating. Both the predictions side of it fascinating because, predictions are like the guarantee that they will be proven wrong. And so it's just a question of how and to what extent. But also it gives us a sense of who are the who's of NCAA right now that are kind of top level characters, and what do we expect to see in terms of, these are the kinds of people who tend to show up on the pro scene in the next few years too. So it's always fun for me to see these kinds of lists and then compare them against the results at the end of the season and just kind of see how these things mount over time. So a quick note here on the men's side, no surprises that Nico Young of Northern Arizona University tops the list for Track and Field News' top 10 prediction. Not surprising because he's been on top of everything that he does in the NCAA. He's not winning everything, but he's very close to it. And he's just continued to improve year upon year. So we'll look for Nico Young in the top level of the cross country season and then right back at it again in track. But the other thing here that I found really interesting is that Stanford, Track and Field News gave Stanford 3 runners in the men's top 10, that's kind of crazy because it does happen, but it very rarely happens. Yes, Stanford is a very talented team this year, as it were. Will that happen? I think that was a bold risk and is likely to be one of the things that's proven wrong. However, I should note then that between Northern Arizona University and Stanford, they have Track and Field News gave them 5 of the top 10. So there's 2 teams consuming half of the top 10 individual, which is always going to be interesting. And the team battle is going to be crazy on the men's side if Stanford can maintain its anticipation. Northern Arizona University certainly is the team to beat. On the women's side, a little bit more exciting for us as we've been covering the sport is the rise of Caitlin Toohey. And she, having run well in her debut cross-country season, really proved herself in the track last year and finished second, I think runner-up in both the 3,000 and 5,000 indoors, and then was the 5,000 outdoor champion in just an incredible race. So Caitlin Toohey topping the list of predictions for the individual top 10 in cross-country is a reasonable and I think well-deserved prediction, but it's quite something for her to be placed above Mercy Chelangat, who the 10,000 meter champ, Also returning XC cross-country runner-up. Also having won cross-country in the past. As a senior, she is going to be dangerous. And always, the longer the distance and the more challenging the event, she seems to be even better at it. So we'll see. We'll see how that one ends up in cross-country. That's going to be exciting. And by the way, it was NC State. Caitlin Tui runs for NC State, and her teammate, Kelsey Schmiel, is in 4th on the list, too. So 2 in the top 5 from one team is an impressive prediction from Track and Field News. Impressive, risky, however you want to frame it. That's going to be exciting stuff. So we love the fall because it's like marathon season, cross-country season. All of those things are loads of excitement for us, and we'll be covering all of that for you right here. But for the moment, the thing we want to be covering the most, as always, are your questions. Yes, your questions. And so at the end of the month, we do the Q&A episode, as you well know. And in order to have a question submitted for the episode, you only have to go to AtoZrunning.com/question and just put it in the contact form and send away. And you can submit as many questions as you want, as often as you want. It doesn't mean we're going to feature them every single time, but we will certainly do our best to include your questions at the end of each month. And the more questions, the better. One of the things that we feel to be the most valuable about these kinds of conversations is how do these important ideas apply to me directly? And so we're going to make sure we have a chance for that to happen for you at the end of every month. So ask those questions. Go to AtoZrunning.com/question. And one final reminder, if you need a little more support than just some answers or questions or listening to the podcast, we would love to help you out more directly as well. We've got a number of different services in our coaching aspect, including if you're not ready for the full-on coaching dynamic, we are happy to write training plans and customize some work for you in individual season basis as well. So check that stuff out by going to AtoZrunning.com, look for the word coaching, and we would love to help you there also. With that, we always appreciate your time and attention to our words. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.